You're listening to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, featuring guests who take the scientific talk about food and break it down for practical use. You've heard the phrase, "You are what you eat." Come find out what that really means. Experience conversations with experts in the field of nutrition and understand the power of food for our health, well-being, and beyond. Now, here's your host, registered dietitian and nutritionist, Mathea Ford.
Hi there, it's Mathea. Welcome back to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast featuring nutrition experts who are leading the way using food starts today, right now, with our next guest. It's great to have Nicole Bathurst on the show today. Nicole, welcome to Nutrition Experts. I'm excited to have you on the show and share your expertise with my tribe.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today, all the way from Australia.
Yes, I think our guests will notice that. You have an accent.
Yeah. Well, I think it's you who have the accent, but anyway.
I have a little bit of a Southern accent, yes. Yeah.
You do.
Nicole, you are a registered, in the United States, we call them registered dietitians. Is that the same terminology used in Australia?
It is similar terminology. Yes. We also have dietitians who are a part of the Dietitians Association of Australia. That you have to fill I think from memory, you have to be working full time, and I don't fall into that category because I'm only working part time in my position, and then the other part of my position is I've got a business.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about what led you to dietetics?
Oh, absolutely. I sadly grew up watching my mum struggle with emotional eating, and I developed my own struggles with emotional eating. So I actually developed bulimia when I was about 18 and struggled with that for nearly 10 years. But it also created in me a real desire to understand food and nutrition. And when I first left high school and worked in the bank, I would buy nutrition books. I don't know whether you remember many, many years ago, Lesley Clinton and her Raw Energy book, and then Fit for Life. And those kind of books really sort of intrigued me, and I just loved that connection between, food and health. And it sort of drew me back to university, and I went back to university at 23. And it wasn't long, into my journey when I realised that bulimia wasn't really a healthy weight loss strategy, and began to sort of take steps to deal with that. At 53, I'm still fascinated with food and its effect on our health. I just love it. I still read everything I possibly can, and I just love sharing that with my clients.
So I read a little bit on your history, and it said that you had breast cancer, and that kind of led you towards more of the raw food stuff. How has that changed go ahead.
Yeah, so it was actually the other way around. So it was a little bit of an interesting journey. I did manage to definitely deal with my bulimia, and by the time I got married at 28, it was no longer a part of my life. But I was still struggling because of what I witnessed with my mum. I still struggled with that whole fear of gaining weight. So, maintaining my weight was always a big part of my life. But then when I turned 40, a friend of mine died of breast cancer, and it was almost like my fear of gaining weight became my fear of getting breast cancer. And I was doing a lot of research back then in that field of, avoiding cancer. And a lot of the literature out there was talking about, going raw food, becoming a raw food vegan. And I sort of started down that track. But, in hindsight, when you look back, you just go, oh my goodness me, I was hungry all the time. I had abdominal pain all the time. And it wasn't until I got breast cancer myself at 48 that I kind of woke up and just went, what am I doing? You are actually eating a lot of sugar. And I think it's so easy for us to not realise how much sugar we're actually consuming. And I was eating a lot of fruit. I was eating, having green smoothies, which contain dates. I was having honey in my tea, all these things that we can kind of look at and think, well, they're healthy. There's nothing wrong with them. But when you're having a lot of them, it all adds up. And I was literally eating every hour. I just, was always hungry. And when I got breast cancer, I'd done enough research into cancer to realise that to give myself the very best chance of recovering and getting healthy again, I decided that I needed to cut out all of the fruit for a season and all of the honey and all of the dates. And it was really, really hard because, when I look back now, I can see I was definitely addicted to the stuff. But it changed my life. Not only did all my abdominal pains and, bloating and gas go away, but for the first time in my life, I could actually eat breakfast and not be hungry again for about 3 hours. So it was a real eye-opener, and that's kind of began my journey into sugar and this whole awakening of what sugar is actually doing to us. So when you think about
the way that people normally eat, or what is a normal diet, if you can categorize anything as normal, so to speak, what would you say is kind of wrong with the way most people eat?
I think what we're realising now is that this whole low-fat era pushed us into a high sugar era. So, we became very afraid of fat, and we've just cut out fat. But when you cut out fat, what actually happens is you increase your sugar. And that's especially true of processed products. And so, we think we're doing the right thing by having, say, low-fat yogurt, but in actual fact, that low-fat yogurt is high sugar. And we think that we're having, a healthy muesli, but in actual fact, it's packed full of dried fruit and honey. And so we're just consuming what we think is healthy products, but in actual fact, they are packed full of sugar. And that's not even, we're talking about products that appear to be healthy. That's not like the obvious unhealthy foods like, cakes and biscuits, which are everywhere as well.
In the United States, it's kind of funny because we subsidize sugar production. And so there's no fat lobby, I guess, but there was a sugar lobby. So we went to this low fat kick, and can you talk a little bit about the addiction part to sugar, like how we're just so drawn to it and how it affects us?
Absolutely. I don't know whether there's a movie over here that was produced in Australia called That Sugar Film. I just encourage all of my clients to watch this movie because it's a fantastic journey of a guy who is a very healthy eater, and then he starts to eat, average person thinks is healthy, and he's consuming like 40 teaspoons of sugar a day. And it just shows you how easy, and he actually comes to America at one stage, which is really good because that really blows me away. You guys supersize me products. And, you can be consuming 40 teaspoons of sugar just in one drink, which is so scary. But the whole addictive side, I actually think this is really, really exciting for anyone listening to this podcast, because what it means is that you're not weak-willed. You don't lack self-discipline. You are addicted. And that means that we can relieve ourselves of all the guilt and all the shame that goes around being, when I can't resist having, my chocolate bar every afternoon, or I just want to have sugar after everything I eat. You're not weak-willed. You're not, don't lack self-discipline. You're addicted. And I think that's really important to understand, because sugar affects the same part of the brain as drugs and alcohol, and that's proven. So whenever you have sugar, it's releasing hormones in your body to make you feel fantastic. These hormones are things like adrenaline and serotonin and dopamine. We get addicted to that, and because we love it. And so absolutely. And it gives us that pickup. And then what happens is about an hour later, all of a sudden your blood glucose, which was really high because you just had this can of Coke or this great big donut or something like that, has now crashed because your body has worked so hard to get that blood glucose down, because your body doesn't like having a blood glucose level that's too high or too low. This is in addition to all those other hormones being released. Now that your blood sugar is too low, your body releases different hormones to make you feel really, really hungry, so that you will go to the fridge and have another donut or have another can of Coke. So you've got all these factors working against you, so to speak, to drive you to eat more sugar. So it's just this whole cycle, which unless you become aware of it, it's very difficult to move yourself out of it.
It's not an illegal substance. It's a very common substance. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's everywhere. It's just at workplaces. I think it's one of the hardest things. Work environments have, whether it's machines that have chocolate in them, or whether, some of our companies up here provide free Tim Tams. There are, I don't know whether you have them over there in America, but they're a chocolate coated biscuit with a soft centre that people just love to dunk in their coffee. Providing, they're just so moreish. People just, it's so easy to eat 3 or 4, and before you know it, you've eaten a whole day's worth of calories. Yeah, it's frightening, really, how addicted we are. And I think all of the products, there's so many products these days that we give to our toddlers. I don't know about you, but we've got little yogurt pouches that you can give to your toddler, who can just take the lid off and start sucking this sweet. Yeah, and so we think that's healthy because it's got the label yogurt on it, and it might have, the word fruit on it, but really you're just giving your child, 5 teaspoons of sugar. So how do people
break free from that addiction? How do they break that cycle, that constant high sugar, low sugar, need more sugar? How do you do that?
I believe it starts with education. Starts with educating people on exactly where the sugar is. Coming to the realization that there is absolutely no nutrients and no fiber in these products, and that you are on a very unhealthy pathway. Because when you have a look at all of our lifestyle diseases, they all have gone through the roof as our consumption of sugar has gone through the roof. We need to begin a process of moving away from it. And really, it means getting back into the kitchen and cooking your own food. So I think for me, I really begin a process of educating that we need fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So what are the healthy fats? What are the healthy proteins? And what are the healthy carbohydrates? This is one of the biggest missing links I'm finding in working with clients, is that we don't realise that the healthy carbohydrates are vegetables. I don't know about you, but we've got a healthy pyramid that really leads people to believe that they need to be eating bread, pasta and rice to get their carbohydrates. And of course, we don't just eat bread, pasta and rice. We throw in then muffins and donuts, and we've got this belief that we need to be eating those products, when in actual fact we're not getting any nutrient from those products. It's the vegetables that we get all of our vitamins and minerals and fiber, because fat and protein don't provide us with any fiber. Definitely education, and then teaching people how to eat that way.
When you're thinking about what you teach people, how do you get away from those cravings for sugar, though? Because those are so strong.
Yeah, they are so strong. Absolutely. And it is not an easy process. But like any addiction, you have to go through a weaning process. So, in many respects, it's easier to give up alcohol and smoking because you can just stop them altogether. But we can't stop eating. But what we can do is stop eating the sugar. And I think in the beginning, it's about and really not even in the beginning. I don't know about you, but I still know exactly what I'm going to be eating from one meal to another. I have a meal plan, and I shop and I cook in advance, and I know what I'm going to be eating. Because if we leave it to chance, it's just too easy to go, oh, I don't know what I'm having for dinner tonight, and then you get tired, and before you know it, you're going through the drive-through and having takeaway. You're just grabbing a chocolate bar or something like that. And I really like to talk to my clients about that whole decision fatigue. I'm not sure whether you've come across that, but it's a very real thing where that was what scientists have learned, is that we actually only have so many decisions that we can make in a day. And so if we get to the end of the day and we're tired and we're hungry, we can't be bothered to make a healthy decision anymore. We just go, I'm too tired, and we just don't make a healthy choice. But if we know what we're going to be eating for dinner that morning, or even that week, we decide what we're going to eat and we prepare in advance, it's just that much easier to make a healthy decision. So it really does involve not eating the sugar and starting off the day, especially with good quality protein, good fats, and vegetables. So eating something like, eggs cooked, even having something like bacon and eggs, but adding in lots of vegetables like some mushrooms and tomatoes and baby spinach, and having a really good breakfast that isn't full of sugar, that isn't going to send your blood glucose through the roof, so that you don't start that cycle. And then it's the same with lunch. Having a good lunch and a good dinner is going to keep your blood sugars balanced, especially in those first couple of days, because what you find is after a couple of days of not having the sugar, those cravings start to go away. But it's not an easy process, and people really need to set themselves up for success by planning and prepping and being organised and knowing exactly what they're going to be eating. And and even having some healthy treats so that you don't feel deprived. I think that's really important as well. But making healthy sweet treats. I make like little protein balls just with nuts and seeds and maybe some dates, so that you've got that little sweet treat, but you have it straight after a meal so it doesn't send your blood glucose through the roof, and then you have your little treat, and then you go and clean your teeth. You know what I mean? We really have to pull out all the stops because it's not easy. It's not easy. But once you start the process, it definitely gets easier once you wean yourself off the sugar.
What I love about what you just said is the meal planning and the decision fatigue, which I have known about, and it's important, like even just to pick out your clothes the night before and lay them out so you don't have to think about it in the morning. With the meal planning, the awesome thing is that you can involve your family, involve them not only in the planning, because I have a 12 and a 13-year-old. They have pretty big opinions about what they want for food. Whether they get that or not is always, but if you have your meal planned and say you work, and your child comes home maybe at 3:00 in the afternoon and you're not going to be home till 5, they can start some of that preparation if they're old enough. And that teaches them then the value of cooking and preparing food. And it becomes actually a very pleasant experience for that child or family to see it as kind of a time to come together as a family and instead of that rushed, mindless driving here, driving there, drive through, eat it in the car, that type of activity, it becomes a memorable experience. So I think because food has meaning beyond, what it's a beet or it's a carrot. It also may be what we had as a child. You have some very specific memories, so you can put those positive memories in your kids' life, brain, whatever. So I love that. You just so much have to, when you have the mindset, when you're ready to do your meal planning for the week, and buying food. I mean, if you don't have it in the house, it's really hard to cook healthy. So if your time to go to the grocery store is the weekend, then you're planning ahead and you're doing it. So I love that.
Absolutely. I love it so much that I developed and I help my clients develop a 3-week cyclic menu.
That's a good idea.
So that then
well,
you
that's
never
what
have
you
to
do in a
think.
hospital. I mean, you have a cycle menu where it might be offset a little bit, but so you don't see the same things over and over. It never really occurred to me to do that at home, but that is an awesome idea.
Yeah, and the other thing I do with a lot of my clients is they have partners who are on these rosters, so that the partner might be working for 6 days and then off for 4 days. So we work a cyclic menu related to that, because you cook different meals when the husband is working as to when they're not working. So they might be involved in some of those meals when they're not working. I even look at it from that perspective as well, and that has really helped a lot of my clients. But what's really exciting? I have to share this. I've got 4 children who are all grown up now, but they even do menu planning. And they tell their friends, oh, you should be doing a menu plan. You know what I mean? So that they, because they know how much
and it's not a chore for them
is.
because it's something that they grew up with and they experienced, and it was a positive experience.
Yeah. And look, the other thing, I don't know whether you have it in America, but we have something like where you can get online and order your food and then go and either pick it up from the supermarket or they deliver.
We have that.
So that just, all that time that you would have spent walking around the shops and buying your food, you can now spend in food preparation. So it's just that whole mindset. And I think too, when you're not walking around the shopping centre, it's easier not to be tempted to buy those foods that are, at the end of the aisle.
So when you're working with people, how do you help them? Because I know that some of the hunger that you feel is truly like, yes, you're really hungry. And then some of it is kind of that false hunger, like, you're on a sugar low or whatever, but you don't really need to eat something necessarily. How do you help them identify what is real hunger?
Look, I think that once again is a real journey, and my big belief is at the beginning of this journey, you don't let yourself get too hungry, because when we're really hungry, whether it's real or perceived, we tend to not make good choices. In addition to eating, a really healthy breakfast, lunch and dinner, which does have, the healthy fats and healthy proteins, I also encourage my clients to have on hand some healthy snacks, and that usually is like a handful of nuts, or if they eat dairy, maybe some carrot sticks and some cheese sticks. So something that they've got there just in case they are starting to sort of feel a bit wobbly emotionally. Oh, I'm starting to feel hungry, and this is the time of day that I would normally go and have a chocolate bar. They've got that handful of nuts there, or an appropriate snack, like hummus and carrot sticks that we've got pre-prepared. And then they can have that, even if they're not really truly hungry, at least it's something that's not going to derail them. And that will kind of, in time, they will get much stronger, because it really is a muscle, isn't it, that we strengthen by not having the sugar. our cravings go away, and we become less afraid of being hungry, although we find that we're not hungry
I
anymore.
had some other thoughts when I kind of read on your website a little bit, and I was looking at the testimonials. Some people were loving the fact that, you were so kind and so helpful to them. But one thing they mentioned was their personal shame or fear about going to a dietitian because of their eating habits, because they have bad eating habits. A lot of people are apprehensive about even getting help because they're afraid of, they eat bad. So what do you think about that? How do you help people with that? How do we as dietitians change that perception that we're the food police?
Yeah, the sugar Nazi. Look, I think that's why I am so excited to share that sugar is addictive, because for me it does release people from that shame of you're not weak-willed, you don't lack self-discipline, you are addicted. So there is nothing shameful about how you are eating, and it's not your fault. I think too, that's the other thing I find myself saying a lot, is it's not your fault that you think that what you're eating is healthy, or that you have found yourself in this place where you're eating a lot of foods that you know are unhealthy, because our marketing is so powerful. And even some of the messages that we as dietitians and health experts have been sending over the years has been, less than helpful. It really, you can't blame. It's not a blame game. It's just, it is what it is. You know what I mean? We thought we were doing the right thing by encouraging you to eat low fat, but in actual fact, we led you down the garden path, but we didn't know it back then. So it's just really embracing what we do know now, and educating people about what's happened, to calling it out and saying, look, it's not your fault. Let's get on with it. Let's start a journey. Let's try and work on this and provide you with healthy alternatives. Whenever I run a function live, I always have food. It never ceases to amaze me how many people are surprised at how tasty healthy food can be. Because people have this, this image that eating healthy means, a boiled chicken breast and lettuce. So much of what we do really is education and being gentle with people and saying, let's start a journey. Let's start a journey of walking towards a healthier lifestyle. And I'm really big on it's not a diet. It has to be a lifestyle choice, because if you go on a diet, it becomes an on-off thing. Whereas a lifestyle is embracing everything that brings. So that means that, you might get a bit wobbly and fall off track on your birthday or Christmas, but let's try and make sure that we've got as much healthy food there as possible. If some extra things do creep in, let's try and push them out as soon as possible and get back on track.
I remember when I was in the Army and I was the dietitian for the Post, and people would see me in the grocery store and they would rush by me and say, "Don't look what's in my cart." And I'm like, I don't care right now what's in your cart. I'm not going to. But it's so funny because I think you're right. We do have to get over that perception that we are somehow perfect. We are not. You said you struggled with bulimia. We all have some sort of, everybody has something that affects you that either made you choose this way of life, made you choose to be a dietitian, or made you more or specialize in a certain field. So I think we as dietitians, though, don't acknowledge that shame or fear or apprehensiveness about us being the food police. So I love that answer. Hey, it truly is. And I don't necessarily care where you've been. If you're ready to change, I'm ready to go with you. Nicole, what is your favorite food?
It's chocolate.
Okay, what kind of chocolate?
I love the dark chocolate. The 85 or 90% chocolate. But But what's been interesting is that I have always loved chocolate, and but the more sugar I've cut out, the more I've liked the darker stuff. So to me now, it's not that bitter. It's actually quite nice. And if I go and have the normal Cadbury's, we have Cadbury's here in Australia, it's actually too sweet. Do you know what I mean?
I drink Diet Coke, and if I go to a restaurant and they give me the wrong thing, they give me the regular soda, then I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, so it would have to be that and mangoes. I absolutely love mangoes.
Too.
In fact, I spent some time in Thailand a couple of years ago, and just the fruit is just amazing over there. And to be able to get, fresh coconuts and have the coconut water and the meat inside, and oh gosh, I feel like I was in heaven.
That's awesome. What are some ways, what we've talked about today, what are some things that our listeners can do in their daily life to just make their life a little bit better from what you've been talking about? Some simple things.
Absolutely do some meal planning. One of the biggest things that I do and encourage my clients to do is prepare your vegetables for time. So if you come home, I would come home when I had feeding a family of 6, I would come home from shopping and do things like peel the whole kilo of carrots, grate some, chop some ready for a casserole, and chop some ready for like a roast dinner, and then put them all in containers, and do the same with my cabbage. And I would wash my spinach and chop it up ready to go. If you've got your vegetables ready to go, you will use them. If you're starting and you haven't prepared your vegetables, it's all too hard. It's like having your clothes ready for the next morning. You just don't have to think about it. And I think, even chopping up your meat so that it's ready, it's diced, ready to go in the casserole, or it's sliced, ready to go in the stir fry, you are far more likely to do that. It just even helps, even if you've got a meal plan, it's just that extra step closer to actually doing it and making life easy for yourself. We have to get our food preparation to become such a habit, like cleaning our teeth. We don't think about cleaning our teeth anymore, we just do it. And so we've got all these things in place. We've got our meal plan, we've got our food prep, we've prepared some of our meat and some of our vegetables in advance. It just makes life that much easier to
And the other thing
healthy.
about that, what you talked about, is that makes it easier for other people to help. If you've already got everything together and you're running late, or somebody else can throw something in the crock pot or put it in the oven or whatever needs to happen. So it allows that helpers, because sometimes we take everything on ourselves, I think, and that just adds to the stress level. So if we can find ways to let other people help us, that's good.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we did in my family was, my husband would cook a barbecue, and very, very quickly the boys learnt how to cook a barbecue. And so they would learn how to cook the meat and then come in and help do the salads and things like that. I agree with you. I think that if we know what we're doing, it just flows down, and it means that everybody else can get on board, like you said, and it can become an enjoyable experience rather than a stressful, what are we having for dinner? I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. It becomes this, oh yay, we're having a barbecue with who wants to cook the meat, and who wants to help me do the salad. It just becomes an enjoyable experience that we can do together. And not only that, as mums, more is caught than is taught. So if we're modelling this organised, healthy way of eating, that's what our children are going to catch. That's what they're going to grow up doing.
I always have a basket of, so when the kids come in and they're like, I'm hungry, I want something to eat, I'm like, there, go grab some fruit. So they've gotten into that habit, a very good habit to have. Who would you say is best suited for what you're talking about, going through the process of getting off of the addiction to sugar and stuff? How do you know if you're addicted to sugar? Although I know the audience probably knows.
Yeah, it's interesting because mostly people know, Mostly people know that they're addicted to sugar, especially if it's really obvious, like, they have to have a chocolate bar every afternoon and that kind of thing. But sometimes people don't know. Sometimes people will come to me and say, look, I've, just the weight started creeping on and I'm not sure why. I eat pretty healthy. But when I do a dietary intake and have a look at what they're typically eating during the day, there's a lot of hidden sugar. And it's in those products that, like I was talking about at the beginning of the session, where we're just not aware that there's, so much sugar in diet products and so-called healthy mueslis. That's where the education comes in, and being able to look at a person's diet as a whole, because one, the muesli might not have an extraordinary amount of sugar in it, but it's the muesli or that cereal coupled with some low-fat yogurt and then coupled with, a health bar, and before you know it, you are eating a lot of sugar. So it's that education and making people aware of where it is, and then making some healthy swaps.
I'm always amazed at the amount of fruit juice that people drink.
And I'm a big proponent of, you do not drink fruit juice, you eat fruit. I think, that's probably the biggest area, and even all the studies show that the biggest area where we consume the most amount of sugar is in our sweet drinks. Atrocious. It's just so easy. Like a can of Coke has 10 teaspoons of sugar. It's just so easy to down, an extraordinary amount of sugar. So I think you just have to cut them out totally. And if you want fruit juice, you need to eat a piece of fruit and drink a glass of water. What we don't understand is that fibre in the whole fruit slows down the sugar getting into our body. So we're not having that addictive effect, and we're not having that, it's not putting us into that cravings and constant hunger cycle, which is why it's, it's important to understand how to make a smoothie properly. Smoothies can be quite full of sugar if you're making them incorrectly. If you're just packing them full of fruit and then putting dates in them as well, or some people even put honey in them, for goodness sake, you might as well be drinking a can of Coke. Making the smoothie itself, you are getting rid of a lot of fibre. Yes, the fibre is still there, but you've broken it up so that it's so fine that now the sugar is able to rush into your bloodstream. So I think we need to learn also how to make smoothies properly and, have one piece of fruit in there, have lots of greens in there, because that's why we're having a smoothie in the first place, to get some greens into us, and then putting some healthy fat in there, like maybe half an avocado or a handful of, nuts or seeds, to make it more of a balanced product, but also so that it's not going to send your blood glucose through the roof.
What do you think is next in this kind of field of, sugar addiction and, way of eating changes? What's next, and how do you think it's going to affect healthcare?
I think that it's the whole sugar. And I think that in Australia, and I know that they're talking about it in England, is actually putting charges on sugar, taxing sugar, that the sugar products become more expensive. I think that's the way that we're going, is that we're going to be really educating people on sugar, and also refined carbohydrates like bread and pasta. Our bread is just so refined and full of sugar, many of them, that it's just not a health product anymore. And I love to talk about how bread has, 100 years ago, the bread used to be a healthy product because we actually used the whole grain. There was the fibre and there was the wheat germ in the middle. But, through time, we've processed it so that we don't have the germ in the middle anymore, which has got the healthy fat in it, the wheat germ in it, and it doesn't have the fibre anymore. So this product that used to be healthy and a staple, I should say, of our meals has now become just a processed product. Yeah, it's just not viable anymore to be eating large quantities of it. So I think that's the way that we're going is really moving away from sugar, because we've realised how damaging it is. All of our lifestyle diseases are because of the amount of sugar and processed products that we're eating. So hopefully we're coming back to really more of what we were eating 100 years ago, which was just real food.
One of the things that's happened here in the U.S. is they've started putting calorie counts on menus. I watch people how it takes them aback to see that at the healthy restaurant or healthy walk-up place or whatever, if it's a national chain, it has the calorie levels typically, and it can make you stop and think about what you're picking. Just even not necessarily to the granularity of how much sugar's in it, but just to the point of saying this food item is 1,200 calories, and that's in your mind, maybe half of or more of the total calories you should eat for the day. But I love that, because I do think we have to do something to make people more aware. And we as a healthcare community did kind of create a little bit of the problem by saying, we need to be low fat. So of course food processors replaced fat with sugar because they want the food to still taste good.
But I think too is understanding that food manufacturers actually don't care about your health. That what they're interested in is you buying their product. And so they spend a lot of time finding the bliss point of foods, which is just the exact amount of fat and sugar so that you keep coming back for more. And, not believing, educating people on labeling, because you can say all the right things on a packet, but if you read the ingredients, and have a basic understanding of those ingredients and a nutrition label, you can very quickly see that this is not a healthy product to be eating at all. So much of our jobs I see is education. I think that there's so much power in knowledge, in understanding all that we've been talking about today. Yeah, getting out there and sharing this knowledge and relieving people of their guilt and their shame and their fear, and helping them, on this journey, this healthy eating journey, because it's fun, it's liberating. I still talk about how liberating it is not to be addicted to sugar anymore, and to be able to feel satisfied after a meal and easily go, 3 to 4 hours without eating
Nicole,
or feeling hungry.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. I know my listeners have learned a lot about just sugar and eating better, just even paying attention to what you're eating. So I hope you'll be open to coming back again and maybe even sharing more. Okay, if the listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Via my website at naturallynick.com.au.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes, and it's NIC.
Yes.
Nick, right?
Naturally Nick.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, guys, this has been another great episode of Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast that is all about learning more so you can do more with your nutrition in your life.
You've just listened to an episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast. Be sure to get more information about this week's episode at www.nutritionexpertspodcast.com. Tune in next time for another great conversation with a nutrition expert and expand your personal knowledge in the field of nutrition, one conversation at a time.